So people always come to me and tell me, hey Ken, could you please talk about, index funds, ETFs, stocks, which I talk about so much. By the way, guys, before you come and ask me to talk about something, please check my channel because I have over 350 videos and see if I haven't spoken about it. But someone asked me to talk about ETFs. I'm going to talk about ETFs because they are very good investment instruments and I love them and I invest in them. And I think you could leverage them to get to your financial goals. And by the way, FX Pesa is down. The link is down below. Make sure you look at it. If you want to invest in stocks, you want to invest in ETFs, you want to invest in indices, you want to trade Forex, FX Pesa, link is below. So click on that link and you will get some commission when you join. Remember, here at Ken's Money Matters, we talk about the money mindset, how to make that money, how to enjoy that money, how to manage that money, how to invest that money, and how to assure yourself of a lifetime of income, basically financial freedom. So with ETFs, what does it mean? What are they? How can you invest in them? What are some of the best ETFs anyway that you can invest into? And of course, how do you invest into them? I know most people will be asking me, hey Ken, you said ETFs, but how do we invest into them? So I'm going to cover all these topics in this video. So stay tuned, and leave your comment below. Ask me questions about ETFs and share this video, guys. So ETFs, exchange traded funds. There are many different investments. There are so many investments, right? Sometimes when you get in online or you talk to a friend or you talk to someone who are, someone like me, you get overwhelmed. You're thinking too many things to think about, too many things to remember. And you're like, I don't want to think about them. Can you just, help me? And now here I am trying to simplify that process for you. Now, out of the investments that you can make, you can always buy a share of a company, which is stocks or shares or equities, whereby you buy part of a company, you own it, it appreciates in value and you make your money and you go home smiling and happy. Then we have different variations or forms that people have now come up with to make investing even more interesting. And one of them is ETF, exchange traded funds. So with exchange traded funds, they're like mutual funds. So investments brought together, right? So what they've done is bring different investments. So let's say those companies that you're buying, they put them into one basket of the things that are alike in a certain way. They share certain commonalities. They put them all together so you can buy it as a basket. So you can buy it as a basket, and the difference with mutual funds is that you can also trade it as just like any other stock. So you can buy and sell and trade it in the market just like any other stock. Exchange traded funds are some of the easiest way and best ways to diversify your portfolio, because instead of just going to pick Apple, Google, Amazon differently and trying to figure out which one is the best, you could just say, you know what, I want to pick all the big IT stocks, and then you put them together in one basket and then you buy them as an ETF. You can also buy them as a mutual fund, but a mutual fund is a different discussion. ETF is tradable, mutual funds are not. ETFs will definitely just be tracking a particular benchmark. So they have a benchmark, a particular fund that they track. So they could be saying, okay, we want to be tracking the largest 500 companies in the US. And then you form an ETF that tracks all those companies within the S&P 500, for instance. It's basically a pooled investment and it tracks a particular benchmark, and it could be anything, and it could be actively managed or passively managed. That's what an ETF is. It's a very simple thing, a basket of stocks, depending on certain commonalities that you can buy and sell in the stock market like just any other stock. How do they track all these benchmarks? So let's say one is benched on the 500 largest companies. Let's say the S&P 500 ETF. How do they track it? They own the same equities or securities within that particular benchmark. So as that one is performing, they just follow or mirror that kind of performance because they're owning them in equal proportion and therefore tracking that benchmark. That's how they track it. So I know someone's going to be asking me if the ETFs are taxed, because you want to know if the Uncle Sam is going to take part of the money. Anyways, they are taxed just like any other investment. And again, taxes depend again on jurisdictions, on many things. Depends on the stocks they're tracking and many things. It could be, or maybe you could be taxed on your capital gains on the ETF. So let's say you sell it at some point, you made some money out of it, the government wants part of the capital gains you earned from it. That's one. Unless there's some kind of incentive that the government has around that particular ETF. You could have to read about that specific ETF to know. Then it could also be taxed based on dividends. So there are ETFs that will pay you dividends, and those dividends could be taxed by the government. There are many ways in which it can be taxed, but yes, taxation depends on the ETF, jurisdiction, and many other factors that the ETF will then tell you. Now, the next question is, do they pay dividends? You want to earn some profits out of it. It again depends on the ETF you're tracking, or the benchmark, or the securities being tracked. So again, they do pay dividends. Most of the ETFs pay dividends. They pay to their shareholders depending on the profits they make. Just like any other company makes a decision whether to pay dividends or not, ETFs are the same. So they can pay you dividends, and there are some that don't pay you dividends. Some are just normal ETFs that don't pay dividends, so they accumulate your returns and put them back into the ETF. So yes, if you want dividend paying ETF, they are there. If you want non-dividend paying ETFs or non-paying ETFs, then they're also there. depending on what you actually want. The final thing is the expense ratio. What's an expense ratio? It's just how much you pay for that ETF. Expense ratio is how much you pay for that money to be managed. I always say, how is the other person making money? ETF, they manage it for you. It can be passive, can be active, but the expense ratio will depend on whether they are actively managing it, meaning do they just continuously try to beat the market by selecting certain stocks, certain ETFs, certain securities in there, or they just passively track an index like the S&P 500 and then forget about it, passively managed. So the expense ratio will depend, but they're usually the cheapest ones. ETFs are very cheap to manage in that sense, but that will depend again on the ETF that you have. Expense ratio is something you must check. How much are you going to be charged if your money is going to be in that particular ETF? Now, we've said the advantages of ETFs, we've said what they are, we've talked about the fact that they are easily the best way in which you can diversify your portfolio. They are easily the best way you can buy many stocks without actually having to, select one by one, therefore saving you time, energy, wastage of, resources and many other things, right? Makes your work easier. And of course, they have very low expense ratio, meaning fees. So in this case, you're thinking, okay, Ken, they sound great. Which are the best ETFs we could buy right now? Now, I use Vanguard. I'm a Vanguard person, and not only Vanguard, I use other brokerages as well. But I find Vanguard has some of the best ETFs for me personally, and therefore I'm going to recommend some that you could buy on Vanguard if you have Vanguard, or you could go and find an equivalent ETF somewhere else. Remember, ETFs doesn't have to be in the same brokerage. You could find an ETF that is just tracking IT companies, tracking data and AI, tracking energy, tracking financials, tracking healthcare, tracking consumer goods, tracking rates like real estate. So it depends on what you want. But there are some that beats the others. Yeah? They are the leaders among equals. So Vanguard is a brokerage company, as you know, and I said if you want to invest, you must have a brokerage company. That's obvious. And by the way, FX Pesa is down. The link is down below. Make sure you look at it. If you want to invest in stocks, you want to invest in ETFs, you want to invest in indices, you want to trade Forex, FX Pesa, link is below. So click on that link and you will get some commission when you join. If you can't access Vanguard, you want to look at these ETFs as a guide into what ETF you want to buy based on your brokerage. So what are some of the best performing within Vanguard? So we have the MGK, which is the ticker symbol for Vanguard Mega Cap Growth ETF. Performance this year alone has been 24.7%. As at now, 24.7%, with an expense ratio of, listen to this, 0.07. That's extremely low expense ratio. Giving you a 24.7, that's almost a 25% return on that ETF. That's Vanguard Mega Growth ETF. Now, you can find an equivalent of that ETF somewhere else, because just mega growth companies are very obvious. You can go and look at the mega growth companies anywhere else in any brokerage and then you'll find them. Then we have the VUG, which is Vanguard Growth ETF, giving 23.92%. That's a 0.04 expense ratio. Extremely low. That's even lower than the other one. Vanguard Growth ETF. So this is just basically growth stocks. 23.92, that's 24% return. That's within 1 year. A year performance. With an expense ratio of 0.04, quite low. VUG is the ticker symbol. So if you're in Vanguard, easy peasy. Then we have Vanguard Russell 1000 Growth Index ETF. Again, 23.73, 0.08 expense ratio. Then we have Vanguard S&P 500 Growth ETF, which is the VOOG as the ticker symbol, giving you 22.89%, 0.10 expense ratio. Then we have VOX, Vanguard Communication Services ETF, giving you 21.66%, 0.10 expense ratio. Then we have Vanguard Mega Cap 300 Index ETF, giving you 20% year performance, 0.07 expense ratio. Then we have VGT, Vanguard Information Technology, one of the best, giving you 20.57% at 0.1 expense ratio, a little bit higher. Then we have Vanguard Financials, which I love as well, VFH, giving you 20% with a 0.10 expense ratio. And then we have VV, Vanguard Large Cap ETF, 18.52%, giving you 0.04 as expense ratio. VOO, which is one of the most popular ones, Vanguard S&P 500 ETF, giving you 18% at 0.03. Now, in different jurisdictions, different countries, you will find some of these ETFs are not allowed to operate because there are rules in every country. You find an equivalent one for your country. Find an equivalent one where you are. Find an equivalent one within your brokerage. You will always find financials. You will always find large caps. You will always find S&P 500. You will always find mega caps. You will always find growth ETFs. It doesn't matter. You don't have to use Vanguard. you can use any other brokerage and you will find most of these. And some brokerages will also link to Vanguard ETFs, and therefore you can still access the Vanguard ETFs within your brokerage. So you don't have to be going to Vanguard to buy these things. I'm not linked with them in any way. I just love it because I've used it all the time. It's a wonderful investment brokerage, has a good history, has good management, has all the factors that I always look out for before I get my money anywhere. So these are some of the best ETFs you want to buy. And if you want to look at the popular ones, you want to look at the popular ETFs, we have the Total Bond Market ETF, which is Vanguard Total Bond Market ETF, BND. We have the Vanguard Total International Bond ETF, right, which is BNDX. We have Vanguard Total International Stock ETF, Vanguard Total Stock Market, Vanguard High Dividend Yield ETF, Vanguard Growth ETF, Vanguard Small Cap ETF. These are the most popular ones. So if you're going with popular ones, these are some of the ones you want to take. We even have the Vanguard Energy ETF, which is quite good as well. Tell me which one you want. Tell me which one you think is the best for you. You make a decision on which ones you want to buy. And trust me, your portfolio can be diversified however you want and whatever it is that befits your circumstances. So let me know which one you're buying, which one you're looking into, and if you know about ETFs and if you've ever invested in any. If you haven't, time to start. If you have, let me know how it's going. Until next time, I'm out.